Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking with Laura Bell-Main, who is the founder and CEO of SafeStack Academy. SafeStack is a mission-driven and community-centric online training platform that provides software development teams with the skills they need to build high-quality, secure software. And we're going to be talking to Laura about what are the skills needed to build high-quality and secure software, what her company does, but also what are some best practices in the market for secure DevOps and app security development, so on and so forth. Before we do that, let's say hi to Laura. Laura, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
It's my pleasure. And I think you're in New Zealand, right?
I am very far away. We have hobbits and a lot of cyclones at the moment, but yes, lovely part of the world.
That's funny. Myself and my three boys are all huge fans of Lord of the Rings. And one day that's on our bucket list is we've got to get down there and find the Shire.
Oh, absolutely. It's waiting for you when you're ready.
That's awesome. And just before we hit the record button, you were teaching me how to pronounce the place you're from, and I believe is it Whangarei?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a Maori place name, so our indigenous people. So anything you see with a WH is an F sound.
Okay, now I know. So what's it like there? I mean, tell me a little bit about the town or the city or the area.
Awesome. I kind of gave up on the big city life. I'm living in a small town, about 50,000 people, but it's in the subtropical north. So it's very humid and there's a lot of beautiful ocean and a lot of hiking and outdoor things to do. So feeling very lucky.
And how do you get any work done with being surrounded by all that natural beauty?
It's tricky, but I love what I do, which makes it a lot easier. I think I would struggle to do a boring job.
Well, I mean, if you love what you do, then you're truly blessed, and you're living in an awesome location as well. So you're double blessed. Let me ask you though. I mean, I think in the 120 plus episodes that we've recorded for Secure Talk, you're the first person that I've spoken to who's based in New Zealand, and we don't have on our radar anyway, a lot of cybersecurity, either startups or mature companies based in New Zealand. In fact, we don't even see a lot of, I mean, because you're talking about, building high quality, secure software. I'm not really aware of, a huge software development community in New Zealand. So tell me, how did you come to found SafeStack, and what's the ecosystem like there for security and also for just software development in general?
It's a really great question. I think we're a little bit of a quiet giant in this space. So on the software side, we do have some really big companies come out of here. Often they get acquired by more international brands, so they get, swallowed up by the motherships. But companies like Xero come from New Zealand. So it's probably our third biggest export at the moment is software. We are a tiny country, so bear in mind that we're only just shy of 5 million people. But we have a huge software community spread all across the North and South Islands. And there's some really cool technology being built from, we've got a lot of fintech. We've got some really cool stuff in changing the way that shopping happens. We've got stuff in the movie industry from wet to digital. So we've got a lot of things, just people don't associate it with New Zealand. They tend to forget we exist, and that's okay sometimes. For security, we have a very small security population. Like everywhere else, we struggle to fill our roles. We have probably 2 or 3 kind of growth companies coming out in the security space, but I'd say we're more focused on consultancies more in that space because of the maturity where the country is and just because of numbers. But Australia, just over the water, has a much bigger community. So we tend to occasionally get adopted as Australians, and we join in with the Aussies for their stuff too.
Well, knowing some people from New Zealand and Australia, I'm sure you just love it when you get mixed up with or convinced or what's the word? Just assimilated into Greater Australia.
Well, yeah, as long as I don't have to live there. I love my Aussie friends and cousins, but they do have all of the bitey, spiky, poisonous things, and we have all the beautiful things. So I'm not in a hurry to trade.
That's awesome. Hey, so I mean, yeah, I mean that's amazing. I know that I guess like everybody else in the world that New Zealand punches about way above its weight when it comes to rugby. But the fact that I mean, I'm impressed that you have so many different tech related companies based there, and that I'm totally not aware of it. And so I mean, I definitely need to do a little more research on that. Did you get
Mm.
your start working primarily then with local companies, or were you starting to consult immediately with companies around the world who needed help in terms of security
Actually,
for their development teams?
my start was actually really unusual entirely. It was none of those things. I started off age 17 as a COBOL developer
Hmm.
for taxation systems. I did some real-time radiation monitoring software for CERN in Switzerland. And then I went and did government work, so for the equivalent of the NSA, but in the UK, doing counterterrorism. And so I actually did a lot of um, very high-end software development before I came into the security space. And then I migrated more into the offensive security side about 15 years ago now.
Hmm.
And then in 2014, I just had my first little girl, and I was kind of fed up that I was seeing the same things over and over again on the offensive side of security. And I knew that I still loved building software. So I kind of became this hybrid and started working with very high growth companies, companies like PushPay, which they do church giving software, but they've got a lot of customers over the US. Um, to see if we could reinvent how security was working so that it wasn't a blocker for them. In fact, it helped them go faster. So, kind of my consulting grew out of a love of building amazing software and wanting it to do great things.
Awesome. And if maybe you can just tell me a little bit about what SafeStack actually does to help companies, secure their software development.
Awesome. Yeah. So, we started off doing consultancy many, many years ago. And the idea was we gave the skills to the team. So we don't believe that consultants should, build themselves a very comfy seat and stay there forever. You have to give those skills to the teams you're supporting. You don't succeed if you haven't done that. Now, when COVID hit in 2020, all of the organizations we were working with, these very high growth companies, a lot of them kind of, they're like little turtles, went into their shells and, looked after themselves, which is exactly what they should have done. And so we took the opportunity at that time to go, well, what if instead of us doing what we do for one or two companies here and there, we could do it for every software developer? So there's 30 million software developers in the world right now, and it grows at a rate of about 1.2 million a year. And so we wanted to see, could we change it around so that secure development wasn't something you came too late, that every developer could do, and that it was part of software quality, not as a separate thing. So what we do is we have a range of courses and qualifications for every role in the software team. So testers, analysts, architects, UX folks, every role you can think of. We build up on core subjects, not just for the bit of code you write, because we actually think that's kind of late in the process, but for every stage, there's things to think about. And then we have hands-on experiences in labs to play into that. So not just your capture the flag style that we're used to, but how do we simulate all of these activities that we should be doing? So threat assessment and thinking about design. And then we have a community, and that's the bit I love the most. And that's bringing together organizations from around the world and making it safe to say, hey, I have no idea what I am doing. What have you done? Allowing them to ask anonymous questions and just really share their approaches, because the future of secure software isn't about someone like me saying, hey, your baby is ugly, you should feel bad, you should do this now. It's about saying, hey, engineering teams, you really know this space, you know the systems you're building. This is just a skill set you've never had time to develop. So we're giving the skills and the thought processes, and then hopefully one day it will belong to them, and we will be able to just be the very niche specialists at the edge that support in those strange cases nobody's encountered before.
Well,
We've got eight. Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
carry on.
No, go ahead.
Uh, I was just going to give you an idea of scale. So we have 865 organizations now in 65 countries. So it's quite a growing movement.
That's awesome. And now, are most of these programs kind of self-directed, or is it a hybrid approach, or how does that work?
So it's all asynchronous. So we do monthly seminars, which are more synchronous with a person, but they're more of a kind of a facilitated book group, if you will. So, for example, we would um, do a group threat assessment of a new architecture that we've designed. So we will provide the stimulus, the example architecture, and then we get our learners to interact with each other to do a threat assessment and really get stuck in. But the majority of learning is online. And we have a team of specialists here in New Zealand and in Australia who are building content and releasing it every month. So you can learn around whatever you're doing, which helps also with time zones and things, because we're all over the world. So being synchronous is very, very hard. And it makes it prohibitive for a lot of organizations who couldn't afford to take 2 days out of their schedule to do a full 2-day course.
Sure. Well, and there's I may definitely value in going through some type of certification program. The kind of in-person exercises that you're talking about are also really important. I think, anybody, because the threat landscape evolves constantly, and one day you could be working on one type of project and the next day something completely different. But having that I guess that community of alumni and instructors to kind of fall back on and say, hey, this is kind of unusual situation. What should I be thinking about? I think that's tremendously valuable as well.
Yeah, and I think the reason that we're so passionate about that part is, so let me give you some just kind of, there's some kind of misconceptions in secure software and application security in general. And it's about how many people we have. So in New Zealand, for example, the average size of our security team, even for large enterprise, is 1.9 people. So that means even in a several thousand person organization, there might be just one and a bit persons in charge of all information security. So when you get to AppSec, they haven't got a hope. They've got too many other things to do. And even in those organizations that do have a few specialists, you're still talking about, one or two specialists to several hundred software development people. And so you can't scale it that way. Now, we like to think that everyone is doing DevSecOps and everyone is, everyone knows all this stuff and we've all got our sneaks in and, but it's really not the case. What we've learned so far is less than 5% of the organizations we talk to are what we would call mature DevSecOps practitioners. The rest are actually much, much earlier in our journey, but we really hear more stories from that small minority. So I think this helps us, instead of trying to get specialists into every environment, give a broad set of foundations to a very large group of organizations who are in need of a much more structured approach than perhaps we've taken into account before.
Makes a lot of sense. What do you say in terms of, look, security training and awareness is important, but at the end of the day, your job is a developer, and we need to focus on the business goals versus having you, totally focused on security. Understanding, though, that the threat landscape and best practices are constantly evolving. So there's a role for education and awareness and community. There's also some pretty powerful tools out there used by developers to kind of help guide them in terms of, writing code that is safe, or checking the code that they're submitting, or in terms of controls around how they use in different repositories and so on. So there's some kind of there's an effort, at least, for automation as part of the development process versus, and I wouldn't say it's versus education, but maybe in line with education.
No.
But what are your thoughts on that?
I think they're complementary. So the way I describe it is, I love tools. We use many of them ourselves internally. We build software as well as building education. So we kind of have to live what we're teaching. But it's much like when you buy a gym membership. I have owned many gym memberships, and I am not the healthiest, fittest person on the planet. I'd love to be, but I'm not. And that's because buying a gym membership, buying a treadmill doesn't make you fit. Buying a security product and putting it in your life cycle doesn't necessarily mean that your team is embracing security. You need not just the technologies and the tooling and the automation, but the understanding of the role that plays, and the thought process, so that you can make the analysis and make the decisions with the results these tools are going to give you. So we see ourselves as kind of half of the picture. We complement and actually cultivate people into using their tools more effectively. We would much rather people know why those tools matter and what to look for and how to really appreciate the value in their world, because that means that they will then use them more. They'll get more value out of them long term.
Again, makes a lot of sense. What are, I mean, I'm assuming you have several different courses or programs. Maybe you can give me an idea of some of the different options that that companies or developers would have in terms of where they could focus and how they could get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have courses which cover things like Introduction to DevSecOps. We've got a threat assessment course. We've got security fundamentals courses. We've got courses for software testers, and we've got our finding and fixing series, which cover common vulnerabilities in different architecture types. So we've got one for microservice architectures. Mobile security is coming out at the moment, standard web applications. We're pretty much, if we're seeing our customers building it, we're building education in it. We even have courses coming through in the next year in securing AI and machine learning environments, securing data pipelines for data science teams. We want to be where the software developers are, not necessarily where the security community is, because we're not as in touch with where technology is moving. We then have the ability in the platform to set what we call learning pathways. So these are groupings or structures of courses so that if you've got a team, some teams know where they want to go and they will set their own pathway and say, hey, I want to do this one, this one, this one. But many teams don't know where to start and they want an effective pathway to their goals. So we give them the ability to then set a subset of courses as relevant to different roles in their teams. So, if you've got a BA, there is a pathway that we could create that's just for them, that doesn't take them wandering off into areas that might not suit their skill set, but it does complement what their development team will be doing. So by doing this, by keeping our content really relevant to where software is and where it's going, it gives our learners not just a chance to learn once and well, but to keep that learning going at the speed that their software development world changes.
I see that as kind of like almost like a must-have for any organization, whether it's SafeStack Academy or some other type of education source.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in fairness to all other providers, there are many wonderful providers out there. And I think when you're planning your learning, whatever tool you decide to use, or whether you build it yourself, remembering there's different roles in your team and your team only functions because of that diversity of role, and then factoring it into what you need and what you're teaching is really fundamental, because historically, we just haven't done that. Everything's been aimed at the senior engineer. Roles like testers, product owners, business analysts have received very little security education historically. So it's time to change that.
How do you keep your content fresh? Yeah.
So how do we keep it fresh?
Yeah, because I mean, you could publish something today, and 2 years from now, it could be totally outdated, partially outdated,
absolutely.
or yeah.
Yeah, it's a never-ending story, right? I think we've intentionally signed on to never be done, and that's good. Our team love that. We have a group of really senior subject matter experts on the team who were published authors, we're contributors to OWASP projects around the world. We've lived and breathed as practitioners, not just consultants. And the reason that we release our course content monthly is because it gives us a very tight production cycle for it. So when something changes, we can go back very quickly and go, well, what just happened there? The community also helps us with that because we can, put amendments out the moment they happen. So yes, we have a course on X, Y, and Z. There's just been a massive breach that we all should be learning something from. What can we be learning from that situation? And then we can feed that back into our roadmap and get it into the courses as they hit production again. So we're not trying to make, the infinite book that will last forever. We're trying to make a really rapidly evolving resource that is going to be that trusted sidekick whenever you need it.
What's your perception of the number of breaches or percentage of breaches that are caused by some type of, issue with the software development versus just the business email compromise or some type of, social engineering or malware attack?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors that affect our ability to even really know the scale of what's going on here. Because of breach disclosures being the way they are around the world, there's very few countries in the world that mandate that if you have a breach, you have to tell anyone. The only reason we tend to know that there's a breach happening is that it has been made public somehow. So there are a lot of people affected, or it has been publicized either by the attackers or by a company's had to respond. That means that we've got a very skewed picture of breaches. I think there's a bit of software security that we overlook that is probably contributing a lot more than we realize, and that's the connectivity between our systems and applications. So there are lots of flaws in our software. I've been dealing with software now for a very long time, and I have yet to see a system that doesn't have some form of flaw. And it's not an insult, it's just the reality of software. Bugs are much easier to create than we realize, of any kind. But the thing that's changing the most rapidly is how quickly we're integrating software pieces together. So if we look at our stacks from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we were building a lot of components ourselves. There were no libraries to use. There were no integrations. There was certainly no third-party SaaS solutions we could integrate with. We're now building our software in a much more connected way. So it's not just about the code we write, but it's the code we inherit from others. Now, people will call this software supply chain, but in the software development world, we don't think of it in that language. And I think it's important when we do security that we bring our language to that of development, not just in the security world. And we talk about our dependencies, our relationships, and our integrations, and how those are going to affect us. And I think if we were honest, the bigger cause of breaches now is third-party components and integrations with systems, and that's only going to get worse.
Well, on that topic, what are some low-hanging fruit in terms of best practices you can adopt to prevent some issues?
Absolutely. So it's a lot of it's going to depend on what you're building out of. So, there's some big giant caveats. Please look at your own stack and your own technology suite. But let's have a look at some really simple things you could put in place. Aren't going to cost you anything. Sorry, security vendors out there, including myself. So if you're in the GitHub space, turn on Dependabot. Let it tell you when there are problems with your dependencies. You can buy tools for this, but there are open source tools and free tools. So Dependabot's one in GitHub. You can look at OWASP Dependency Checker, which does a similar job, which is free to use. Let's make sure all of our credentials and our secrets are gone from our code bases. It's 2023 now. We really need to be better at that. And so go and have a look at something like TruffleHog. There are many different free open source tools you can run in your pipeline that will just take 2 to 3 minutes maximum to check for the potential of you having some secrets in code you shouldn't have there. And if I was going to give you a third tip, it's going to be to look at the account security on your platform. So if you are using any form of cloud platform, well, that's not technically the code you write. That platform's a massive target, because even if you get the security of your code amazing, you've built Fort Knox, it's impenetrable. Well, it probably isn't, but let's pretend. Then attackers are quite efficient. They're not here to go, hey, I'm going to prove that I'm greater than you. They're objective focused. They want to get to the treasure. So if they can't get in by your front door, they're going to go brick a window somewhere else. So go look at your cloud hosting provider. Make sure that you're using different accounts for test and production. Make sure you've got your two-factor turned on. All of these are really unsexy things, but it's those unsexy problems that when we solve them, we have huge impact. So get rid of your old dependencies, get rid of your secrets in your source code, and have a look at the basic configuration of your cloud platform. And that's 3 things you could do today that would make it even better.
And I mean, all that totally makes sense, and you're right. It should be something that we all do on a regular basis. And how do you, in terms of time management? Okay, so you're a developer. You've got, everybody has pressure. You've got to get the job done. How do you work this into your daily routine or regular process so it becomes almost just part of the DNA of your dev program?
So there's 2 things that I like to do on this front. Firstly, it's making it a team sport. This is why we train every role. It's not about that one security-minded engineer who's going to go above and beyond. It's about everybody. In the same way that observability and scaling and performance and usability is a shared responsibility, so is security. So you can have a security champion on your team by all means, but it needs to be in the DNA of everybody. The other side of this is I am fundamentally a very lazy person. And I kid you not, if there is an opportunity in my world to get rid of a job, I will get rid of it. And so I use my security skills in combination with my development skills as a superpower. Your engineers, the thing they love most is finding an awful problem and never having to do it again. So, if they understand the problems and you can give them the basic building blocks, they can turn these into automated things that can just run without anyone having to think about it. And that's where security should be. It's not about having specialists and extra effort. The best way to do it is to do it a few times, hate it with a passion, and then make it go away using the skills that you use in your professional life every single day. And if you can create a small backlog in your development teams of security automations or security quick wins, and let people pick one every so often and measure and celebrate the velocity you have of A, adding things to that list, and B, taking them off again, that's going to create a really awesome culture that kind of promotes, as part of what being a software developer is, doing some security along the way, but not being overwhelmed by it.
That's some awesome advice. When you go and talk to prospective customers, and when I say you go, I'm assuming most of your communications are online these days. But what do they want to know? What's their biggest concern? Because as you mentioned earlier, there are other providers out in the marketplace. But what are the key things that they're looking for?
There's a range, and it depends on the age and stage of the company, but some common themes. There are a lot of organizations there that are overwhelmed. There is too much to do and not enough time, and they want to know that there are pathways that have worked for other people that they can see and they can put in place. Now, we don't believe in vanity metrics that say this training stops 93% of vulnerabilities. That's fairy tales, and we all know it. But what we can say is, hey, we work with several organizations that look like you, and here's what we mean by look like you. Here's a profile. And here's the course structure that they really liked, and here's where they put it in, and here's some tips for along the way. And we can also sit and listen. We do a lot more listening than talking about what's hurting right now. A lot face what we call the pit of despair, which is they know they've got security issues, they know they need something to do, but they found so many bugs or so many things that need to change that they feel like they're on this precipice that they can't get across. There's just too much to do and they can't feel any way forward. And so helping them understand that you can just do this in tiny modules. Our courses, while they might add up to a few hours per course, they break down to 2 to 4 minute chunks, and 2 minutes a day isn't very much. So it's kind of, part of it is empathy, and part of it is a little bit of structure that we've seen work before, and part of it is a lot of listening and kind of going, right, yep, you're not on your own. Here, come meet some other companies that look just like you, and connecting them to each other.
And who's driving this in your target customers? Is it more on the compliance, or is it the HR side, or is it the CISO? Because I mean, obviously, a lot of educational programs are brought in from HR or learning and development. You might even have the compliance team say, hey, we need to have XYZ training in place. But when you get over to the CISO side, typically you're looking at technology fixes. But so when you're talking about an education program, I mean, who are you communicating with, and who's bringing you in?
Oh, so this is where I love what I do, because it's really, really diverse. So I love that you're mentioning learning and development teams and risk and compliance teams and CISOs, because over in the US, that's a lot more common. But we're in 65 countries, and I can say that probably less than 5% of organizations, and our organizations range from two-person nonprofits who look after the widows of firefighters from 9/11 in New York, all the way through to national level and international airlines and banks. So like huge breadth. And I'd say probably less than 5% have a learning development team, and only a few have a risk and compliance person, let alone a team. So for those ones, for those large ones, we often do a combined effort. So we will, our primary champion is always somebody in engineering leadership, because it doesn't matter if it's the right tool or the right program on paper. If your engineers don't want to do it, then you're not going to get anywhere with it. So we work very, very closely with the engineering leaders to understand what their development culture is, and will we fit with what they do as engineers. And then we support the learning and development folk and the risk and compliance folk in building that bridge and that relationship so that they're getting a much better chance of success. For those who don't have one of those teams, we often work with the engineering leads, sometimes with individual developers who just want to push it from the bottom, which is a hard challenge, but good luck to them. And sometimes with the security leadership. But whenever a security leader comes to it, we try very hard to also bring in someone from engineering, because this really has to be both teams at the same point. Otherwise, it just won't work.
Sounds like a great approach. What, how do you price your services? Is it by course or by month, or what? How does that work?
Well, we're very transparent. When I was back in my security roles, I hated when a vendor wouldn't tell me the pricing. So I've made a rule that our company wouldn't be secretive. So our book price is $300 per learner per year. So there's no tiering in that. There's no crazy, extra add-ons. It's one price. You get all your courses, your qualifications, your pathways. But we also have a free plan. And the free plan is there to help small organizations who might not have the budget yet, just to get started. So they can do some basic training, they can roll out something regardless of where they're at. And in these economic times, even larger organizations can use a little bit of free stuff from time to time. We have volume pricing available for our larger organizations, because obviously $300 per learner when you've got thousands of learners doesn't scale. But we talk to our companies. We have kind of a very good framework for how we do that pricing. And we find that is definitely in the Western countries a great price point, because it means you can train your whole team without having to go, oh, right, hang on, this is too much. There's a threshold here I can't cross.
Actually, you reminded me of another question, because earlier you mentioned you were in 65 countries, and just now you referenced Western countries. Do you offer the programs in any other languages besides English?
Only English at this point, and with closed captions. Now, we are looking at whether we do anything else long term, but what we found is the majority of development training is done in English around the world anyway, which is not ideal, but is sort of, it's just part of how that ecosystem is. So accessibility and the inclusion of people from around the world is very important to us, but we're only a 21-person company, so we're kind of taking it very cautiously and carefully on picking those languages. So we will see, but we do have learners, many learners who are not English as a first language, and they find, because they can change the playback speed on our training, so they can go slower or faster, and they can have the captions there on every single piece of training we produce, then they find that actually they're coping pretty well. There's been no complaints so far.
Awesome. So how does it work with a company that's essentially a content and education provider? What do you look for in terms of your next development? I mean, you already said how you keep your content fresh, but how do you see your service evolving? I'm assuming this is all on like some type of learning management system or LMS that allows, an admin to track progress of different individuals, and maybe see their scores, time studied, things like that. That's a big assumption. Yeah. You'll answer me that. Do you see the development more on the delivery methods, or more on the content, or what?
So I think it's got to actually be on three prongs. So we built her an LMS in the end because we couldn't find any that we wanted the minimum viable LMS. Most of our learners and our leaders, they want just to get the job done. They don't need it to do 17,000 things. They just want 3 buttons, and they're very clear. And so we did a lot of validation. We built the system that they needed and wanted. And we also have now the ability to integrate with other people's LMSs. So you can get our content delivered for a number of our programs into those LMS systems. And we're growing that area as we push into larger organizations. The content will always continue to develop. Now, our team are attending and speaking at a number of conferences. We're published authors. We still build software ourselves. So we will continue to work with our developers and to understand where the tide is going with their world and continue to develop that out. That will be an ongoing thing forever. And then finally, there's that interesting space of where will this head? Now, we've seen a lot of gamified approaches, hacking labs and things, and they're great, but they focus on a certain type of personality, the slightly competitive people, the confident people, the people who traditionally are just those writing code. So we want to make sure that whatever we're planning is inclusive and doesn't just favor the confident people and let other people self-select out. We also don't believe that delivering education straight into the IDE is the right solution. Having spoken to a lot of engineers now, their IDE is already a very, their development environment is already a very busy place. And they choose when they go and seek help. They don't want the help layered on top. Kind of, if any of us are old enough to remember Clippy from Microsoft days, they see your education thrown into their IDEs being the equivalent of Clippy, and it annoys them. So we're not going down that path. What I would like to be able to do, and things we're playing with, experimenting with, are how can you support a development team building good software, but still give the developers, the engineers, and designers the autonomy to make those decisions? So, for example, are there ways that we can gather very basic things about what is being built or designed and pop out test cases in Cucumber that could be put into an automation testing pipeline? So we're playing around with things that support people, but without taking them away from what they're doing, without taking away their autonomy, because I truly believe the future of security and of their high quality software lives with them. Our job is just to make their life easier. And that's a different approach to many other security tool vendors who, they live more in the, hey, we're going to assist you where you are kind of space. And that's just, our different view of the world, that's all.
No, sounds amazing, and I mean, obviously, you've got a passion for this, and you're not just a content company, you're not just a delivery company. You're looking at all aspects of this, and it's more of a kind of a holistic offering. Do you go to any industry events, you or representatives from SafeStack Academy?
Absolutely. I have two young children, so I have a very careful amount. I'm allowed to do 5 a year.
Okay.
So this year, for example, I'm in Confu in Montreal towards the end of February. So
hmm
that's a big developer community up there. I'll be over at RSA, not speaking, but going and connecting with communities and things in April, so in San Francisco. We are going to Render in Atlanta, Georgia, in the end of May, beginning of June, which is a 6,000 person developer conference. And we're going there running a free workshop. We really want to get into that community and really understand their culture and their vibrancy. It's such an exciting space in Georgia right now. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. So yeah, we love to find new events to come across to, either just as attendees to meet community or as speakers, or to run workshops or to connect with organizations. And we'll continue to do that. But backing that up with a lot of online content that people can enjoy. So videos, blogs, white papers, all the usual things you would expect. And my favorite one, which I'm not supposed to say because the marketing team gets upset, is I love when people just email me or drop me a message on LinkedIn and just want to have a chat, because one of the things that I've learned in this crazy journey is that you can never know everything about an industry. So I love listening to development teams and just going, well, tell me about the amazing technology you're building. Tell me about your world. So yeah, we'll continue to do that too.
That's awesome. And well, hey, you said it's 4 or 5 trips a year. I'm assuming that's a pretty darn long flight. Are there direct flights to the U.S.?
We can get a direct flight to San Francisco and to
Okay.
Vancouver.
And that's got to be
There is
like
also,
15,
yeah, it's
16
12
hours or something?
hours.
12
That
hours?
was
Oh,
12 hours. We can also get a direct flight to New York, but I really wouldn't, sorry, Air New Zealand, but I really wouldn't recommend it. It's like an 18.5 hour flight.
oh my
And there are
gosh.
not enough movies on the planet to get me satisfied for 18 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of traveling, but I live in a beautiful place, so that's the price I pay. And I think, one of the things I'd love to share with your audience, if there's anyone sat on a strange dream and they're like, I want to build a thing one day, never see it as a hindrance if you're in somewhere that's non-traditional. So you're not in a big city, just build it. You can make it work. The world is a lot smaller than we think these days.
Well, that's the beauty of the world that we live in right now, right? Especially with all, the different types of SaaS platforms and code libraries and just the modular approach to designing products. It is a really cool time to be alive, and the whole gig economy. I mean, you can really do that. I mean, you can call it geo arbitrage, but I would just call it geo choice. You can just choose where you want to live, and Not for everybody, obviously, but for a lot of us, that is a huge option. So, well, hey, Laura, really enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, like I said before, you have a lot of passion for what you do. I'm sure SafeStack Academy is going to continue to do amazingly well. Look forward to possibly crossing paths with you at one of those events that you mentioned.
Yeah, awesome. I'd love to see you there, Mark, and any of your audience. Come say hello. And just a quick thing, I'm not going to try and sell you anything in this. It's really not my job today. But we do have a free plan. Now, if your organization doesn't have anything yet, come use the free plan. We're not going to hard sell you. If you know of a nonprofit or a small organization that does nothing because they're a bit tight right now and things are pretty hard out there, get them a free plan. We're doing that not just because we're a business and we want to grow, but because it's the right thing to do. So be our voice in the world, and let's get as many software development teams, big and small, doing a tiny bit of security in 2023.
Amen. Awesome. Thanks, Laura.
Awesome.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.